Hello everyone, my name is Deanna Benedetto and I'm doing presentation number 4 on the Work Progress Administration, also known as the WPA for Professor Mazecki, World Literature, Crime, Punishment, and Justice. The first and most obvious thing to explain is what the Work Progress Administration is. The Work Progress Administration, which is also known as the WPA, was an ambitious employment and infrastructure program. The Work Progress Administration was the largest and most diverse of the New York Deal Public Works program. It was created to alleviate the mass unemployment of the Great Depression. Following the definition of the WPA, there needs to be knowledge into who was the creator of this program. The Work Progress Administration was created by our 32nd President of the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. President Roosevelt created the Work Progress Administration with an executive order on May 6, 1935. President Roosevelt believed in the elementary principles of justice and fairness. He also expressed disrespect for giving out welfare to otherwise able workers. This was part of Roosevelt's New Deal plan to lift the country out of the Great Depression by reforming the financial systems and restoring the economic to pre-Depression levels. The Work Progress Administration was created in 1935 during the blackest years of the Great Depression. What is the Great Depression? What did the Great Depression cause? The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world. The Great Depression began after the stock market crash of October 1929, which sent Wall Street into a panic and wiped out millions of investors. The highest rate of U.S. unemployment was during the Great Depression, which hit the low of 24.9%. Over the next several years, consumers' spending and investments dropped, causing steep declines in industrial output and employment as failed companies laid off workers. By 1933, when the Great Depression reached its lowest point, some 15 million Americans were unemployed and nearly half the country's banks has failed. Why was the Work Progress Administration created? The Work Progress Administration was created in desperate times to fulfill desperate measures surrounding unemployment. The unemployment rate in 1935 was at a staggering 20%. The Work Progress Administration was designed to provide relief for the unemployed by providing jobs and incomes for millions of Americans. At its height in the late 1938, more than 3.3 million Americans worked for the Work Progress Administration. The program was supposed to create jobs for many unemployed people, and it did this by paying them to do a variety of things, like building bridges and town recreation centers. The stated purpose of the program was to provide useful work for millions of victims of the Great Depression and thus to preserve their skills and self-respect. The economy would in return be stimulated by the increased purchasing powers of the newly employed, whose wages under the program ranged from $15 to $90 per month. The Work Progress Administration employed mostly unskilled men to help carry out public work. They built more than 4,000 new school buildings, created 130 new hospitals, laid out roughly 9,000 miles of storm drains, built 29,000 new bridges, constructed 150 new airfields, and paved or repaired 280,000 miles of road while planting 24 million trees. What did the Work Progress Administration do for the United States, and why was it good? During the 8 years of existence, the Work Progress Administration put 8.5 million people to work, while over 11 million were unemployed in 1934. The agency's construction projects produced more than 650,000 miles of road, 125,000 public buildings, 75,000 bridges, 8,000 parks, and 800 airports. This made the United States construction rate go up, bettering the country at the same time as employing those who needed it. This also included employment at the Federal Arts Project, Federal Writers Project, Federal Theater Project, which employed thousands of artists, writers, and actors in such cultural programs as the creation of artwork for public buildings, the documentation of local life, and the organization of community theaters. Thousands of those artists, architects, construction workers, and educators found work throughout the American museums, which were flourishing during the Great Depression. The WPA also sponsored the National Youth Administration, which sought part-time jobs for those of young people who needed it. The volume and diversity of work was so large that one researcher wrote at the time, out of all the projects undertaken and completed by the WPA during its lifetime would include almost every type of work imaginable, from the construction of highways to the extermination of rats, from the buildings of stadiums to the stuffing of birds, from the improvement of airplane landing fields to the making of books. The Work Progress Administration was mentioned in the book To Kill a Mockingbird. The Work Progress Administration holds the same meeting as spoken about before, which is a program which gives jobs to unemployed individuals. This occurred by allowing them to build bridges, build town centers, and in return were paid with money. Mr. Cunningham was offered a job with the WPA but wants to refuse it. He decides that he does not want to go work for the WPA because of the fact that if he did, he thinks his land would go to waste. This would happen because the WPA would put Mr. Cunningham to work, meaning that he wouldn't be able to work on his land. He also does not want to work for the WPA because he believes that it is sucking up to someone for a job. And Mr. Cunningham does not want to suck up to anyone, especially for a job. The decision that Mr. Cunningham displays was his self-reliance and his refusal to conform. Mr. Cunningham was willing to go hungry to keep his land and his vote as he pleased.